After Reno, Jack took Tsunami back to Crystal Airport, where he gave the airplane a fresh new look. 1991 was Tsunami's final appearance in Reno. Skip ran her as hard around the pylons as the airplane had ever flown. Jack Sandberg had big new plans to refine the wing design, to reduce drag in the turns. But it was never to be.
This is tape 15 of the Tsunami set, and we're going to pick this up with paint and detail work. Now this is probably the last time that we're really going to be able to wipe this ship down with the M600. Once we put ink on it, and once we do the electrosets and things that we're going to do to detail work, we really can't wipe it down anymore. So what I like to do is take the M600, don't spray it right on the plane, spray it on a nice bounty cloth and just give each surface a good wipe. Now what this will do, first off, if you have any loose dust, lint, fuzz, you name it, it's going to get rid of it, and you'll have a nice surface to lay out your tape. Mylars, one of the first things we're going to do is lay out the numbers, the number 18, and we'll make the stencil for that up. But you want to go down onto a surface that's nice and clean and dry. The other thing, you can see how much comes off. You can see the other thing that happens is it cleans your hand so you don't get the greasy fingerprints on all the time. Now, keeping it clean from this point on is really a more difficult job than you might think it, would be. Because if you're going to do electrosets and they're not going to stick, the little dust that stays on the paint, if you look at the paint microscopically, it's like little mountains. The electrosets don't want to stick. The ink doesn't want to stick. Nothing wants to stick. So by wiping it down, this is almost like buffing it out. Almost, let's consider it the mildest form of buffing out. Especially on our open bay surfaces, you get rid of all the little zits and everything, and now you have a fighting chance that that stuff is going to stick down. Now the first thing I'm going to do today, I'll do the rest of this off camera. The first thing, number one job here is we want to get the pattern made up for the number 18s, the racing number. I want to make up the pattern and get that sprayed on so that can be drying during the rest of the day. I don't have a lot of time to do today, a lot of time. And I want to look around. Again, back to looking around and finding those little bubbles, little flaws, little spots that I want to touch up. Now you'll see right here, I'm just going to try to point to this, right here, there's a little bubble coming up. So what I'm going to do, again, I'm trying to do some kind of, just put a bunch of little holes in it, poke it full of holes, hit it with the little CA, and wipe it down, and then put a little bit of a touch-up of red paint on it. It's all going to get sanded down anyway. I guess the thing that's hard to do for some people is just to recognize that there's soft spots. Because no matter how careful you are, some of this stuff is going to want to keep coming up. And now before we have any of the trim of the ink on, this is the time to fix this crap. And of course I'm going to babysit. Now on the other side here, we had that repair that we did on our last video. I'm just going to touch that with a little bit of sandpaper, some 1200, and hope that let's hope that that one's going to go away. And we can always throw a little bit of spray on this and just see. See, as soon as you put thinner on there, you know it might loosen up again. So just constantly monitoring, constantly taking care of all these low spots. Whenever you have a bubble, slit it down the middle, stick a bunch of little pinholes in it, and put some more dope, some CA on it, and then get some dope on it. Now see, we've gone through down to the original paint here, but that's okay, because we can just get the touch-up out and spray this. Now one thing good, when you have flaws up by the nose like this, it's not a big deal because you don't mind adding a little weight up here. If this was the rudder, we would have been a lot more concerned about it. Again, the trick is when you're doing this kind of touch-up, get a wet coat, a good wet coat. You don't really care how much paint we have up on the nose here. And I want to get the other side where we had that little blister problem. Actually, up here, we're going to buff this thing to death anyway, so the nose is one of the spots we want perfect. Now, from working with a lot of other people, one of the mistakes you can make real easily is be constantly taking the paint out of the gun, back in the gun, out of the gun, in the gun. That's a mistake. Now, what I've done is the red paint has stayed in the gun since we started painting red. So anytime I need a little touch-up here, I just go get the gun, bzz, it's done. Instead of having to load the gun, take the gun, blah, 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 blah. Another thing, always leave the clear in the gun. The clear stays in the gun. You never put colored paint in the gun that you're going to use clear in. Well, Lou Dutka and I were painting a plane one day, and we only had one spray gun between us, and what happened is he painted a plane blue. No, I think it was my plane we painted blue. Then he put the clear in to do his plane. He cleaned it for 4 hours with 10 gallons of thinner. We went out, sprayed the whole plane, got to the top of the outboard wing, right where it says special thanks Lou Dutka. Boo! And it spit out a bunch of chewing gum and oatmeal and everything out onto his wing. And the paint that it spit out matched my plane, and he wasn't too happy about it. So from that point on, we went and bought a clear gun. That's another thing. You need 2 or 3 or 4 guns, and you need. Now in this case, I have one gun with the light blue in it constantly, one gun with the red, and one gun with the white, and we'll leave the white in the gun. We're going to be doing white next. We're going to make the template for the lettering, so leave the paint right in the gun until the whole thing is finished. Even after you start shooting clear, sometime you have to touch things up. Now the next step is we're going to try to simulate these number 18s. They're on the upper inboard wing, lower outboard wing, and one on each side of the body. So we want to kind of make up a template for the white part of this numbering. Before we do anything, I want to make sure I have all of the little dust, even though I've wiped this once before. Get all the dust off of here. Now there's a lot of ways you can lay out these numbers. Number one, you could take that picture down to one of the people that does photocopying, have it enlarged, and use it for pattern. I don't think that's necessary here. We can pretty much copy a number 18 freehand. But getting the size and the thickness right, if we're going to do it freehand, can be a problem. So what I want to do is I want to lay this out, get a rough idea of how big the numbers have to be, make up a rough little sketch, and cut the numbers out of this paper. Now what I do is I'll cut the numbers out and just scotch tape them in place and see how I like the way they look before I go ahead and make a pattern up. Again, this is not a very time-consuming thing, and we certainly on a model like this are not going to consider using decals or anything, that's for sure. Okay, now I have a rough idea of how big I want this. The height, I want to get the angle, the numbers kind of slant back, again just a little bit. I think this is too big. Yeah, a little bit too high. So you can avoid a lot of the problems right away. Don't have the angle right. We know the numbers. I'm looking at the picture. They start on the wave and they go about 3/4 of the way up the body. That's about right. I guess right there. That's it, baby. Okay, so now we're just going to go sketch this out. And in the very beginning, you really don't. I'm just looking at the picture. You really don't have to be that fancy. You can just sketch it out roughly. And then you can decide if you want to make it a little thicker or a little thinner. Let's see, does it go over? Nope, no bottom on it. Well, all this will do is give you the proportion real quick into the program. Now, if you were trying to do a number 10 or something, well, it would be real easy. Now what I'll do, just cut these out and tape them in place, and let's see how they look. brand new number 11 blade is good for cutting out the insides of the numbers. Obviously, you could do your AMA numbers this way. You could do any combination of numbers, letters, trim, stars. Jimmy Casale used to do all the stars in his paint job this way. He had a very complex paint job. Now this is the roughest, and I'm just looking, I made this one too wide. You can just go right down the line here. I see the number 8 is kind of a little sloppy. But what this has given us, the point on this is too high. You can just make all the corrections to the paper before you actually go out and make the stencil. You can see I have to curve this a little bit better. The bottom and top are not equal, but this will give me the proportion I want. Hey, just make a little loop of masking tape here, and you can kind of move these around in position now to get an idea. Just about, are we close? Well, it looks like from here it looks like the numbers are too big, number 1. And the way I'm deciding this is these numbers look fatter. There's more red showing top and bottom of the fuselage. So I'll just go back now, before I even make a stencil, and make bigger numbers. Wider, fatter numbers. See, there's the difference. These are too high and too thin. I need to squash them down and thicken them up all at the same time. And I can do that, in a matter of 5 minutes. Just make up another set. This is the beauty. You have the picture, you just go back and forth, take a look at it, and you can kind of do this without making a big giant commitment to decals or letter sets or whatever. Now let's say you wanted to do your AMA number this way. Well, it would be pretty easy too. Now we know this is too high, and we know we want to make it thicker. So I'm going to use this just as a rough pattern. Cut maybe 1/4 of an inch off of it. 1/4 of an inch, maybe a 1/2 inch. Let's go big time. Okay. Take the 8. I know I want to shorten it up. So let's take the fat side that's up top. And we'll just open it up just a little bit here, just all freehand. Flip it over and do the bottom the same way. And by doing that, I know I'll have it, well, semi-symmetrical anyway. This still might be a little bit too big. I think this is going to have to be shrunk down just a little bit. Yeah, I want to kind of take the top off of this. Take the bottom off of this. Fatten this up. Fatten this up. Again, if you're doing AMA numbers or whatever, you just can go back and forth, back and forth. Now that's pretty close, not exactly, because as we do the black outline on it, it's going to thicken up automatically, but that's about as close as we can get it based on the compromise that we had to make here to the semi-scaleness of this plane. So with this in mind, now I'm going to take this out and just simply trace it on a piece of ordinary office Xerox copying paper. That's the next step. Just trace it out. Now, because these are all rough lines, rather than trace, I'm just going to put dots in the corner and then use a ruler to connect them. And by doing that, then I'll have what I hope is going to be a little bit straighter than normal if I did it by hand. Now, the easiest way to cut through office paper, this is ordinary Xerox paper. The best way I know to just cut right through this, stack it on a stack of paper. Otherwise, the tip of the blade gets dull right away if you cut on glass or whatever. Making up a little pattern like this, whether you do it for your trim job or for... If you go back on the 93 videos, we did the little checkerboards and the cardinals, and knowing how to do this is just a neat little thing that you can take advantage of, obviously. Sketching all the little details. Now again, if this was a scale model, I'd be going crazy trying to make sure this is as scale as possible, but this is, because it's a fantasy model, we really don't have to concern ourselves with that end of it. Overly concern ourselves, I should say. But just make a reasonable tracing of it. And if you mess one up, don't be afraid to just go make another one. It's not that big of a deal. Because if you have drafting equipment or whatever, this would make it a lot nicer. But you don't need, that's one of the points, is you don't need a lot of high-tech stuff here. Now I want to even off the numbers too. You can see I only need that. Now just to give you an idea, this is the first set we made, the second set. And then I went back and looked and I realized I had the one totally wrong. So before I made what the third set is, this is the third set here. And then I trued them all up here. So this is the next thing I have to do now, is get this just put basically in position on the model. Now this is Ross's rubber cement. It can be any brand of rubber cement. It's not important. You do a little practice. If you've never used this before, go get a piece of linoleum or something and do a little test to see how much you need and how long you need to let it sit. All we're going to do is take this and paint it right on the side of the model. Just plaster it right on, right where we want this template to be. Now you can just take the can. You don't have to be very fussy about this. Just get a nice even coat of this right on where you want the lettering to be. You can go over by maybe even an inch past where you want it to be. Try to get it on smooth, of course, but it's not completely necessary. Let it sit and dry for 5 minutes. Takes a minute or so to dry. We'll shut the camera off while it's drying. Now what I did, I put some rubber cement on the bottom and put some on the back of the paper. And just wait, I guess 2 or 3 minutes off camera. Press it down real nice. Now you have to get the little dots in the inside of the insides here. Take the rubber cement, same thing. And sometimes you have to peel them off and put them back on 10 times before you're happy with them. If you just lay them on real casual like in the beginning, and then don't press them down until you're happy. Yeah, we got to kind of move these around. Now, the nice thing about the rubber cement is you can move it around too. See how I'm moving this around? It's not really sticking. I can just position it in place like you would a, heaven forbid, that awful word, decal. Okay, now obviously we got to make 3 more of these patterns. Now if you see what I'm doing, I'm taking and rubbing the rubber cement into the corners. Just go right into the corner and off. Into the corner and off. Find a corner and just, it rolls up just like you're rolling up a carpeting. Into the corner, off. Roll it, roll it, roll it, start rolling it, roll it, roll it. Roll it right down into the corner and off. Right down to the corner and off. And as you're doing it, press the edge down. You want the edge, a nice clean edge. You don't need any technology here other than roll toward the corners. The whole thing is going to happen toward the corners. Now in this case, we want to just work randomly, but we don't want to move the thing out of position if we possibly can. You'll notice it rolls right up like chewing gum. Let's see if I can get a closer camera angle on this. I don't know if that's a better camera angle. That's about as close as I can get. Just rolling it and roll it right up toward the edge. Press the edge down. That just really frees you up to make some pretty exotic paint jobs, exotic lettering. If you're doing a semi-scale model, you don't have to pay a penny for decals. You can do all the stars and bars and everything this way. You want to use brand new number 11 blades so you get nice edges on everything, of course. Now, I don't use an airbrush, but this is what you could use. If you really wanted to, you could use an airbrush. Right now would be an appropriate time because you're not going to put tape on top of things. Remember, the only time I use an airbrush is if absolutely no tape is going to go on top of it. Now, even if this was in the wrong position now, we could move it a little bit. Brush off all the loose chewing gum. Make sure it's all pressed down nice. Now I want to mask with the aluminum foil just a little bit further back, even though we're just going to dust this on. And you can use your own discretion about how far back you have to put the masking tape. You really don't have to put it that far. In fact, a lot of times you don't even have to tape it, you can just lay it. Just want to keep some of this off the stab and rudder. This is about all you have to do as far as I can tell. Now I want to set up the airbrush. I'll set up not the airbrush, the gun. Just put some white in it. Now remember, this is the death combination, trying to paint white over red. So I expect we're going to need at least 3 coats, and I'll be very patient, 1 coat at a time. Now you know you can't get it all on in 1 coat, so just give it a coat. Give it maybe a half an hour to dry. What happens here is if you miss a little spot and you leave some little rubber cement sitting out there, it's going to look like a big hunk of junk. And you can actually get in with an X-Acto knife right now and get it out before the first coat dries. Get the gun spray in a little bit thicker. And actually, when you think you have it white enough, give it 2 more coats. Because once you take this out in the sun, it's not going to be as white as you originally thought it was. So you're only going to have to backmask it again. Now give this 10 minutes to dry, 15 minutes, and then hit it 2 more times. Now one of the advantages of doing this is we have the original numbers. We can just go out and make another pattern. So while this one is drying, I can be working on the one on the wingtip. This way we can get get these going. I have 4 of them to do. So it's actually going to be redundant. I'm just going to repeat the whole thing, use the template, make another template. Actually, you could use the same template over and over again, but what happens is now I have to wait for this to dry a couple hours. Well, I don't want to wait. I want to get in and finish this, so we'll pick this up again when it's time to start pulling off the templates. Now when you pull up the rubber cement, of course, just peel it back carefully, rub the cement off the fuselage. You get a little bit of a rough edge. Usually you have to go around the edge with ink, so you design up. In this case, we're going to outline the numbers in ink, so it doesn't even matter. But the longer you can wait, if you can leave the template on. Now, I pulled this one up after 2 hours. It's not long enough. You need to, I really should make 4 templates up and let them dry overnight here so I could get a nicer edge. But since I'm going to outline it in ink, it's not a factor. All right, I'm going to go do the other 3. Okay, I've tried to position this so everything can be drying. I broke down and made made the templates, and I suggest you do that. Another thing I found out is this particular brand of rubber cement, you really have to put a lot on. Just pour it right on and then start wiping it up. And another thing with this, the white going over the light blue is the same as the red. It's a pain in the neck. It needs at least 3 coats, so just nothing I can do just keep putting it on. Now while I'm waiting for the next coat on the white to dry on the wings, I want to take a brush and where the wave ends, If you look at the picture, I'm just trying to simulate a little more like the way the drawing is. It's kind of foamy at the end of the... And this is really just hand artwork going in here. A couple little dots. Some of these things are real foamy. Again, I'm just looking up at the picture, trying to see just how I can simulate a little more. Then there's one big bump of white up here. Should have put all the hinges in the rudder here. Come on, Wendy. And really, this is just a freehand thing here. It's hard to get in here. I went and got a longer head brush to do some of the artwork here. Again, I'm just working off the drawing, not trying to do anything except just make a copy of the drawing. And we'll do some ink work up here, of course, kind of finalize this up. Now, you know, we always try to, we're taking a break here while our paint's drying so we don't get too itchy to go out and put some more paint on. We always try to bring you stuff long before you're ever going to see it in a magazine, and of course you're not going to see it in a magazine in color. This is Walt Prey's version of a Charisma. He calls it the Opera Coupe. Really a very special looking plane. I can't tell you, the colors are unbelievable. Looks all candy apple. Obviously all buffed out, rubbed out, whatnot. But that's only the beginning. Here at Pro Stunt Products, where we have everything first, before everybody, and in color, twice as much, and more fun than anybody. Check that out. That is Walt Prey holding it. And check that paint job out. Glenn Metter would absolutely have an orgasm if he saw that big eagle. That was the name of his plane all those years, the Eagle. And we used to affectionately call it the Beagle. And if Walt wasn't great enough, fancy enough, good enough, big enough, tough enough, who knows what he is. Anyway, he did suffer some earthquake damage, I've heard through the grapevine, so maybe somebody wants to send him a, you know, something, I don't know, a can of rubbing compound or something. This is cool. Now notice, this is a profile. Notice the paint job on this. I mean, come on, is this ever beautiful or what? Unreal. But as always, and as Wendy always tends to do, he saves the best for last. And I want you really to take a look at this picture. This is one of the cardinals that Walt has modified, and I really have to take my hat off to this guy. He is absolutely a genius. Pro Stunt Products over here. Check the wheel pants, the spinner, the cowl, Big Jim Greenaway's Hemi. Walt is absolutely a master. And if you tend to appreciate craftsmanship, workmanship, he is right at the top, absolutely at the top with Ski for one, and probably 5 or 6 other people I know that just absolutely unbelievable workmanship. Now, if this isn't a concourse winner, I mean, come on, man. I'll stop eating pizza. Absolutely beautiful. The lettering, he always has the lettering from hell because that's what he does for a living, but just look at the detail, the paintwork, and just look at it over and over again. I took this picture and, you know, looked at it for 15 minutes and I kept looking. Of course, it's got a full canopy and the real slick, nicer wheel pants than my plane has, that's for sure. The wingtips with all the ribs in them and everything. Just unbelievable, Walt. I got to take my hat off to you. You're unbelievable. Now, also in this day's mail. 2 more books for Tsunami came in. We'll wait till the end of the video to get some more pictures of them. We have some color pictures of Dago Red, the Rare Bear, Mustang pictures in color. The stuff's just starting to come in like crazy now. So thanks to everybody that sent that. Thanks to Midgley, and thanks to Walt Prey for just an unbelievable job. And we're going to get back and do some more work on old Saddam. Saddam the Tsunami, I like it. I want to give you some tips. This is not going to take long. These are just quick tips. We're going to be doing some ink work on the plane. Here's one of the things you want to remember. If you want ink to stick, the surface has to be clean. Before you do any ink, now let's take a typical surface, and this is the way I do it. Let's say we're going to do the upper outboard wing. Is wipe the whole surface with M600. Get it clean. That gets all the dust and the little surface imperfections, kills them right off. Then, if you're still going to be concerned with the ink, now let's backtrack a little bit. The problem you always have with ink is it beads up like fish eyes. It starts to go on like that, where you get little misses. Part of that can be helped by making it clean. Another part of it is you can take talc, ordinary talcum powder. Glad I can spell, huh? Take the talcum powder, take it on a rag. After you clean it up, and just scrub it right in. Scrub it like you're Baraxoing off a car or whatever. Wipe it clean, and then just go over it with the ink, and you'll probably see a 90% improvement. You'll get nice straight lines then. So, while we're doing ink, and we're going to do some ink today, I hope. Anyway, we'll get to some ink. Clean is number one. A little bit of talc will help if you need that too. You want to use the rulers and the green. This is the surface we're going to ink. Anything you're going to use, you want to have right, not up at the edge, just back a little piece of 1/8 inch tape. Now what that does is the ink doesn't bleed under the ruler then. So, say if you have a triangle, let's just say, you run the piece of tape an 1/8 inch back from the edge, and then when you turn this over, this side of the ruler isn't actually touching. There's a little bit of a gap there so that the ink doesn't tend to run under. If you lay a little template right down on the surface and the ink goes here, it bleeds underneath and the line starts to look like that. So that's a couple little tips you can use for doing ink work. Now, they also make several different kinds of ink. They make ink for paper. It's India ink. This is not the first choice. Then they also make India ink for mylar. Acetate. Either one of these is better than paper. This is first choice, second choice, third choice. 3 choices of ink. Now, during this inking session, I'm going to be using Midgley's ink pens. They're, well, let's show the whole set here, how it looks. It doesn't matter, Stedladders are good. Conors are good. Any professional drafting pen, and the ink that's made for acetate. Now, with this in mind, number one, getting the ink in the pen can be a real pain in the neck. What I would suggest you do is have a little jar of alcohol and some clean paper towels handy, because you see my hands are pretty rough from doing construction work upstairs and paint work and every other damn thing. But if you have nice clean hands, you're not going to want to get them all gushed up. Once this ink gets on your hands, it's pretty much on there for the duration. It kind of has to wear off. So anyway, one of the things that if you get a little on your hands, or you spill, or you get an ink line and you want to take it off, is you have to have, in the case of an ink line, have a Q-tips handy, have a little tub. I usually have like a little shot glass of alcohol handy. Get the Q-tip sitting right in the alcohol. So as soon as you have a whoops, mistake, wipe it. And don't go back and forth and scrub it. Wipe it and pick it up. Take a new Q-tips, wipe it and pick it up. Because, of course, this is going to get on the Q-tips and it's going to make kind of a messy thing. You don't want to smear it all up. You want to wipe it and pick it up. Wipe it and pick it up. And just keep throwing the Q-tips away. One of the things, now some people wear rubber gloves like surgeons wear. I prefer like every maybe half an hour, run over to the sink, soap and water. Once your hands get greasy, everything starts not sticking and making a mess and whatever. Also the templates, and you can go to any art supply store and find templates that have circles, squares, furniture. They have big long lines. They have every possible shape you could want. So when you lay out an ink job, one of the things to keep in mind is if you don't know how many ink lines to put on a plane, a few less is better than a few too many. When you start inking a plane, and Russ Hunsberg is the best example of that, and Russ, if you're listening to this, man, listen to me. A couple of ink lines here and a couple of ink lines, and you can go look at, and we have all these nice Reno Air Race books to check out some ink lining, and you want to put the flap outlines, whatever it is you want to put on your plane. If in doubt, a good way to do it is to go look at some pictures or some old videos of top-level planes. But one thing I don't like to do is start doing this and start putting lines and hatches and things like typewriters and, you know, wagon wheels and things all over the place. You know, let's call this the Hunsberger syndrome. It's just too much and too much. A few less, if you don't know, is better than too many. Well, one other thing, one of the other purposes, and you have to decide this. This is the purpose of ink lines and letrosets to some degree. Here's a wing panel. Right in the wing panel, right about here, you have a little glitch in the paint. Let's say a little spot you're really not comfortable with. Okay, there's the gas cap. Right out here, one of your cap strips has kind of got a spot you rub through. Well, there's one of your ink panel lines. Right over here, something happened to the flap. Well, you can write no step over there. You're trying to hide mistakes. Now, luckily on Tsunami here, we don't have a whole lot to hide, but we do have a few we want to get rid of. Another thing, too, when you lay out any ink work, and boy, sit down, and what I do, I sit down with one of those cardinal things and kind of lay out a little drawing of, I want to write this up here, I want to write thanks Big Jim, I want to write thanks Midgley, or whatever, blah, 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 blah. But now, spell it out on a separate sheet of paper. Because I've done this. I've letrosetted and inked and put on Big Jim's name with Greenaway, spelt with no A, Greenway. I've spelled things wrong. Now, obviously, I spelled geodetic wrong. I bet you all could look at my planes and find plenty of things I've spelt wrong. But we'll kind of lay it all out ahead of time before you get that ink pen out. Don't just start putting lines and hatches and things. Kind of lay it out, and the best one I know for this is the master, of course, is Steve Busso. He makes a full-scale drawing, and of course if you have a cardinal kit you can look right on it, with the trim and everything, and lays it all out in like, you know, 1/10 scale or 1/4 scale, whatever it is. Here's this, here's thanks Mike Rogers, here's Bozo to Jozo, bing, 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 all the lines, the dots, the rivet heads, everything. And now you look at it, before you ever even ink the plane, this stuff is all laid out ahead of time. So these are just a couple of thoughts I hope are going to help you do the ink job. We'll do a little bit of the ink on camera here and follow through with me and just see how much of it makes sense to you. Now, just as a final thing, and because I'm trying to explain everything here, I know a lot of people know all of this or most of this, but these pens have different tips. The reason you have so many of them here, and the smaller the number, like a 00, where the hell are the numbers on these pens? Oh, this is a 1.20. The smaller the number, the thinner the line. Here's a 0.80. That's a large one. 0.60. Probably can't see that on the lens. Okay, and they get finer and finer and finer and finer. You want to save a trick. We'll probably be doing this on camera, but we'll show it up ahead of time. You get a line and it kind of looks like this. I'll exaggerate this. And you can't go back over it. So what you do is you put the ruler up and you take that very fine pen, the 00, and you just connect the dots. And then you kind of lay this line a little thicker with the 00 pen. And you can kind of hide a line that you normally would have to remove. That's another good little trick you can use. Now, just to finish up our dissertation, is the way I like to do it is I like to do one panel at a time. I like to do a panel, let's say I'm going to put some ink here and some ink here and some lettering here or whatever. Okay. Get that panel straightened out, do my little touch-up with the paint on anything that needs to be touched up, and then take that panel, just that panel, and spray one coat of light coat over the whole thing. That seals it in and keeps you from smudging it with your fingers and whatever. Now I go on to the next panel. Let's say the next panel is the outer wing. Okay, one area. Finish that panel, I do all my little tricks, put clear on that wing panel. Now you're going to do the tail next, whatever. The sequence is not important. Canopy. I usually like to start up at the canopy first and get all my details in around, all the little lettering and numbering and everything, and then go right on, bingo, get some clear on the canopy area. So what you're doing is you're dividing the plane up maybe into 10 or 15 little areas. Do one area and just get that first coat of clear on. Now, in the case of the numbers, we have these tremendous numbers, these 18s that we have to deal with. Here's the trick that I've found that works the best. We have these numbers. This whole 18 thing. We did the spraying, the paint's been drying. We peel it off and the edge is kind of ratty. So the first thing, before we even put any ink on it, before you ever even touch it with ink, spray a coat of light coat just around this area. One coat of light coat, relatively thick. That kind of seals up these areas, that they don't start peeling back on you and whatnot. All right, once that's done, now the next step is we want to take a ruler and an ink pen and lay out the lines, like so. We want to outline everything. Of course, the 8 we're going to have to do by hand. Or another way to do the 18, if you really want to, if you want to go and be real, cute about it, is you can take 64th plywood and cut a template of the 18. You can cut this number out with 64th plywood. Of course, you'll have to do these by hand, or you'll have to make 64th plywood. Now, what you do is you take the same thing and just slide it down in this direction, and it gives you this. It gives you that three-dimensional look that Tsunami really has. So I haven't decided how we're going to actually do these 18s yet. A lot of times I find just doing it by hand is the easiest way, and just sketching it in. But anyway, if you were doing your AMA numbers this way, this gives you a nice, I'm sure Walt Prey would have a sexier way of doing it than this. But kind of gives you that idea. It gets all the edges even. Whenever you do that thing with the stencil, you always get a rough edge, so you have to incorporate in the an ink around all the edges. If you remember old Jimmy Casale's plane, he had stars and stars all over the place. Well, every star had an ink line around it. That's usually the telltale sign that you can tell somebody did the rubber cement method. Anyway, and from this point on, once you get that coat of clear on, now you can just very roughly, maybe with 1500, sand this down and break down the edges a little bit, and then ink it. Now the second time, you go over it with clear. Third time, now you're going to see when you sand down, you're going to break the edge. There'll be spots where the edges, little points, bleed through. And then you have to go back over it with the ink, back over it with the clear. So that on the model, wherever the 18s are, there'll probably be 5, 6, 7 extra coats of clear before we get this all leveled out and smooth, and then we put clear over the whole model. Now, no matter what shape canopy you have, and if you write out, typically somebody would put Pilot, Bozo, Baba, whatever. Okay? What normally I would want to do is get this whole area clean. If I'm going to put some hatches here, some ink, some panel lines, the lines that go around a canopy, and then take this whole area and get one coat of clear, same as with the 18s, because this is going to take 3, 4 extra coats of clear. A lot of time we don't have a canopy, acetate canopy on this plane, but a lot of people want to know, do you put clear right over the canopy? Yeah, but don't put thin clear, thick clear. Maybe 40% thinner, and spray it on with 50 pounds of pressure. Not thin clear, or it will melt. And after it's on, 3 or 4 coats. Again, with Letrasets and ink, the first coat you put on, if there's a little ink line here, you want to bury that ink line, so you want a thick coat of clear. Then you sand it down and you knock it. Now the second time around, it's just going to stick up just a little bit. By the third time, you've got it buried, a little Letraset. You put thick, look at this, he can't spell to save his life, thick clear first. This thick clear would probably be 40% thinner. The next coat can be 50% thinner. The last coat's 60%. This first coat you might want to spray at 50 psi. That'll put it on dry. This at 40 psi. And this at 30 psi. Notice as you add thinner, you reduce pressure. Let's write that. Add thinner, reduce pressure. And what that lets you do is now nothing melts. You get that first coat on, it seals everything up, nothing melts. And now as you get down here, you start getting the coats to lay out without any orange peel. By the time you're at the last coat, you're up to 60-70% thinner. This stuff is going on like glass. Okay. I hope that's going to make your next inking job a happy one. Okay, what I usually do now, Midgley gave me these pens, I fill them all with ink. You can see I got some Windex down in the bottom. Almost every time you go to use them after a season of sitting on the shelf, you need to soak the tips in Windex. Sometimes you can get away doing this. Just soak the whole tip of the pen in some Windex, and little by little, you know, you have to kind of do this. Just shake them up, and then you can get them to start to write again. But it takes some soaking, believe me. When you sit them, especially when you get them from Midgley, I mean, he doesn't clean anything. It's unbelievable. Now, this is a good use for that sticky mat that I showed earlier. It's a routing table mat. Always make sure you have the edge down. Now in this case I just plotted out where I want to have. This is going to be a trim tab ink line. Don't over press it and try to start at one end. Hold the pen straight up and down. Don't press too hard. And obviously the amount you can do of ink lines, it's as simple as that. Let it dry, and in which case, let me just see, when you're kind of in a rush, you can hit it with a hairdryer. That'll dry it right up a little quicker so you can go right on. Now if you screw up, if you get a little spot that you don't want on here, take a little razor and just scratch it off. Try not to get the paint off. I always leave one of these pads right where I'm doing the ink work so I can get the pen started. Now I'll get over this and just try to match this up. Go right around the edge. Now these little guys are handy. And believe me, there's so many shapes on this, it's ridiculous. What this is good for is getting in something like a simulated hinge here. Again, if you use one end and just try to balance it off on the other side, you got to keep the tape. Maybe I didn't show this. The tape, I use 2 layers of 1/8 inch tape so that this sits up off the part you're trying to ink. And of course, if you want to do a couple of simulated rivet heads, you just do dots. Try not to press too hard. And you just whatever pattern, you can look all over the place and figure out, you know, what pattern it is you want. I always do little parts first, get the little parts all squared away, get the technique. Always do the bottom first. Notice this is the bottom of the, this is the inside elevator. I get the little hinges on this. Again, this is just like decorating a Christmas tree, but if you're in doubt, not enough is better than too much. So you know what I'm doing? I'm using the edge of this against the line to get my spacing. Get a couple little rivet heads on here, and I'll try to show this on a macro lens. You can be pretty creative. One of the hardest things to do when you're doing ink lines is hold the aeroplane. Now this mat makes it real nice. However, when you're using the fuselage, sometimes you have to hold the plane in your lap with the wing pointed up. You got to get into contortion positions. It's always handy if you have somebody. Let me just show this on the video too. If you have a straight line, one of these drafting rulers with a non-slip back. Now once you put this into position, it doesn't slip. So you can just draw the lines right down. And it's always good to clean the edges off with a little bit of 1200 sandpaper or something. I can see there's little dots of glue on this from using it. Just showed us on a macro lens, and of course you can go look at this is what these books are real good for, is you can go look at real books of real airplanes and get some ideas of what the ink lines look like. Now another thing that's helpful if you make panel lines with a thicker pen than detail lines, what I'm going to do later is go over this with a thicker pen. Now that I have it all laid out, I lay it out all with a thin pen. But now any lines I want to have thickened, I'll either use the thin pen and just double up the lines, or go to a thicker pen. Either way, it's a lot more interesting when you have thick lines and thin lines, rather than have them they all look like they came off the same pen. Now once you have one panel, you want to try to make a mirror image of that panel, so you can hold it back up and just put a little dot here. And this you just use for a reference line now when you're laying out the next ink line. Having that reference line on there. Now I know I went to this edge, and I could reference off of this. Sometimes that's the hardest part of the job, is just getting both panels, you know, close to being the same. Another good trick is to lay out your panel lines in masking tape. 1/8 inch masking tape, de-stickize it, just rub it up on your shirt a few times, and lay it out until you get all the angles and corners and things you want, and then just put the ink in. Alright, now I got one little spot here that the ink bled under, and I'm just taking a razor and scraping it off ever so easy. Try not to scrape the paint. If you scrape the paint, well, just go back and touch it up. Any little extra you can get off with a dry razor once it dries. Now most elevators and flaps somewhere out on a tip will have at least one and maybe two access panels. This is easy to simulate with a circle and a couple of simulated rivet heads. And actually, I'll tell you another thing, if you really wanted somebody to lay out the whole ink line job on your plane, I think Steve Busso is still doing that, so maybe you ought to just give him a call and see what the deal is on it. I kind of just do this by eye. I don't make too big of a deal out of ink lines, but it is a good idea to think about it. Just don't sit down like you're at a crayon board or a chalkboard or something. Now, as always, I'm going to practice on the bottom first. And I just want to get a little outline. I want to do the rough outline of the numbers. As soon as I get this on, I'll get a coat of clear on it. Now these, when you do the template thing with the rubber cement, the edges are kind of rough, so you really have to go over the edges. You just, I find it impractical not to do anything without going over the edges. Maybe there's a trick I don't know about. Somebody out there maybe would like to upgrade me here, and we'll pass it on to everybody. Kind of use our position in the hobby to be a clearinghouse for ideas. Anyway, maybe Walt Prey will tell me, who knows. Anyway, trick one is just get an outline around everything. And then we want to thicken up the outline. It's nice if you have all straight lines. If we had number 17 or something, this would be a piece of cake. And when you do these lines, it's helpful if you can use the thickest pen possible. Unfortunately, these pens Midgley sent me are less than perfect, and I've used about a gallon of Windex to clean them, and alcohol and everything, but anyway. Since we're doing a three-dimensional thing, in the 8, obviously we're going to have to do by hand. Okay, there's step one of our project here. Now, when you're coloring this in, let's call this the color by number set. You see, I made an outline. I'm just coloring it in. Don't press too hard, or you'll leave little marks that come out when you spray to clear. Again, the ink is a nice way to do checkerboards. It's a nice way to do lettering, numbering. And always have an opera tape on when you do this, or you get nervous. Gotta listen to opera when you do lettering and numbering. Now you want to get the pen with the fine point to get the corners, and just notch in all the corners, or if you have a ragged line, a fine pen gets a nice line. Get all the corners just nice. Now you'll see any little rough spots in the paint, and there are rough spots from the rubber cement residue here. You just go over any little light spots with more ink. Now after we spray a coat of clear on this and sand it a few times, you'll see the high spots where the template ended come through, and then you just go back and touch them up with ink. It's a lot easier than doing it with paint. Now see, here's just an example. I see this line is not perfectly straight. So I've got the thin point. We can really get... You make your life a lot easier if you work with all straight lines. I was looking at those Reno Air Race books that Midgley sent down for panel lines, ideas on panel lines. I think we're going to have some good ideas out of them. Now with the thin point pen, you could just go around and get all the edges. Just try to get them even. Look for things that don't look exactly right, like this line isn't as thick as the other one. So I'm just going to thicken up the line a little bit, go little by little. Now I'm just trying to even up, randomly look around for things that don't look even or neat or whatever. And it doesn't take long, even an eye like mine, you can find them. And I guess this is the most important part of all, is just keep looking for things that don't look right. And you can spend a half an hour or so doing this, just inking it in. Now of course if your wall prey, you just lay the brush here and it's done. But you look for little variances in thicknesses, little spots where it's light. Yeah, like this one up here is not as thick as the one on the bottom. And for doing this, you use the fine point pen. You'd be surprised if you practice on on something. Hey, practice on a Ringmaster or something. You can really do some pretty nice lettering, unique lettering, and you don't have to resort to decals. And plus the money, I heard they're getting $75 a piece for transfers now. Just look at it from a lot of different angles, try to get a feel for it. Now you know this is going to be rough, you need to put clear on it next. We can also start sealing in this edge with a little bit of clear too. Just get it sealed in just a little bit. Don't put too much on the first coat, just let it sit. Now I'm just hitting this with a hairdryer because it's real cool in the shop. I don't want that thinner to penetrate too much. Now just let that sit and dry a little bit, and then I'll flip it over, prop it up so that isn't rubbing on the table, and we'll get started on the top. But remember, I always do the bottom first. It's always better to do the bottom, get that out of the way. If you make a mistake on the bottom, it's a lot better than on the top. Now we can flip this over and do the top. And one of the things I like to do is before I go laying out all my ink lines and all my panel lines and letter sets and everything, I like to assemble a whole model and just take a close look at it here. A couple of the things I did the other day while I was fooling around, I added some more white to the wave, changed the canopy configuration a little more to be in what I had in mind, put some rivet heads around the canopy, and now I just want to assemble this and get a rough idea of just about what it is that I want to accomplish with the panel lines. I have to lay out the lettering yet. I kind of like the little notch back on the wing tips. I'm looking at the canopy. I'm trying to figure out how I want to finish off the canopy with some letter sets. The next step here is going to be to get a couple letter sets on here, get some panel lines, and I want to do it very conservatively. I don't want to turn this into something that's all full of ink lines and looks like, yeah, I don't know, it's too busy. I want that quality look, but on the other hand, I want it to look similar to what I have in my mind's eye. And so I've been looking at my Mustang books and just thinking of, you know, what it is that I want to accomplish with the ink and the letter sets here. Now what I'll typically do is run a little bit of a few ink lines and then spray them over with clear. I want to get some letter sets around the canopy here. I want to do the flap outlines. What the whole deal here is, in my opinion, don't put any more ink lines on than you really need. A few, not enough, is better than too many. Same thing with letter sets. I want to get a couple little letter sets on here. And I'm just playing with them because I haven't laid out the lettering on a wing yet. But I want to get a rough idea of what the whole plane is going to look like before I actually lay out the lettering. Now after redoing the canopy 4 or 5 times, back and forth, but again, that's how you just have to keep going back and forth, laying it out. You see I've added to the wave, taken away from it, put more white, added more green to it, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. This is the way you get to a point that you're happy with it, like an artist putting in more red, more blue, more green, more yellow. It's just a question of going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. You can't, unless you have a picture you're copying off and you can just go right off the picture, the only way to do it is go back and forth until you're happy with the result. Now, does it get any better than this? 3 slices of pizza from the nice wife while I'm inking this flat in this elevator. Actually, what I'm doing, I'm working on some of the ink here. We already have ink lines on the elevators, but I want to thicken them up, make them a little more realistic. But it always helps, believe me, it helps when you're doing ink lines to have pizza around. You see what I did? I thickened up the ink line, darkened in, blackened in the hinges. This is the original one, and I kind of like it better black. So what I'm going to do, obviously, is go ahead and thicken up the other one, and by doing that, I just used a pen with a thicker point. And you know, this is the kind of thing you have to go back and forth, back and forth. There's no set pattern for this. Just go back and forth until you find something you like. Just a couple of quick tips. We're going to do some letter sets here. Again, we're going to keep the idea, keep them to a minimum. You don't want to turn the plane into a checkerboard. If you have a few, not enough, it's going to look a lot better than a few too many. And now this is what we'll be referring to as letter dents, is when you press too hard and the surface has a moon crater here and you try to bury that letter set in a little crater. Well, we'd like it to be that the letter set sits right up on top. Don't put the little dent in the wood. Don't press too hard. Again, here's the little letter set engraving tool. It has some numbers. You see how these numbers, you can set the tension on it, the lowest tension possible. I like to use a 1 or a 2 setting. This has a ball on the end. In fact, the ball, this is broken. I have to fix it. The spring comes off. And you can press them on with this. This is another Letraset tool. It's just a little burring tool. You can use the end of a toothpick, a pencil, just about anything to press them on. But the Letraset tool is, of course, the best. One thing be careful of, there are bogus brands that are about 1/10 the price of Letrasets. They tend to melt. M-E-L-T. They tend to melt. You want to get them covered with thick, minimum thinner, thick dope or acrylic. Before you go on, if you put raw thinner or a very thin clear over them, they'll just melt quicker than hell. Now, needless to say, Letrasets come in all kinds of colors, letters. You can go to an art supply store. They're about $15 a sheet around the New York area. You can go out and spend $1,000 if you want on Letrasets, and I'm sure some people have. Tom Lay Letrasets work exceptionally well for our purposes. And you can also, if you go back into, here's some silver Letrasets, some gold, blue, white, silver. I got all kinds of colors in here, gold. All kinds of shapes and sizes and specials, and I've just got everything you possibly, all kind of little special guys. The reason I'm showing this is the tremendous variety you have. So what has to happen is, early on in the program, you have to decide what you're going to do. Now, a typical wing panel, and if you're going to keep it simple like we are, a typical wing panel would include a little flap tab maybe, the AMA number or the name of the plane, maybe a no step down here, maybe a gas filler cap up around here, a couple little things along the bottom, thanks Uncle Jim, thanks Bozo or whatever, and maybe a few ink lines, maybe you want to put a couple on the flaps, I don't know. But by keeping it simple, it has a nice classic look. It doesn't get too busy, and some planes you see, and I mean, they just look ridiculous. There's things all over them, and there's pianos and toilets and hatches and things you know aren't on a real plane. They have batteries out in the wingtips, and oh God, it just looks ridiculous. I want to keep it kind of simple. Again, you know, we're not looking to turn this plane into a Letraset machine. The real Tsunami had a minimum of lettering on it, and there was some right behind the canopy here I want to put on, the pilot's name, some of the other little details up around the nose. Now, if you're looking for a good source of little decals, model cars, the little car decals that have Autolite and Bosch and all things up around the nose, they kind of look cool. I've used some of those on the Red Baron. But the basic idea here is use Letraset brand. Keep them warm. When you're going to do Letrasets, get the heat up to 70 degrees. Fresh. When they're old, they tend not to stick as well. Okay, keep the heat in the house up, and don't press too hard. Pressing too hard, you get those Letra dents, and it's a problem. So, just a few pointers. And we're going to go out and try to get a couple of these on Tsunami before the day's over. These are just some of the things we have in inventory. We have dots, thin lines, thick lines, just to show some of the tremendous variety, little silver rivet heads. Vic Macaluso had a source for some rather expensive but real good decals. One of the things you want to always remember is the pre-release. Pre-release means you hold this up on a piece of, where is that paper? I need to take I don't have a sheet of that wax paper handy. Anyway, you need to take a piece of wax paper and just press them ever so slightly till they start to turn white. And you can still move them, and then put it down on the airplane. Press just a little harder, and you have a little Letraset. Surface clean. If you have greasy fingerprints all over everything, it's going to be a mess. Now, if you want to take that little guy out, let me just show you. You get a little piece of tape. Get off a little piece of masking tape. You decide, too many rivet heads. It's starting to look something you don't want, takes it right off. Now when you want to line up, a hard thing, now if you use Tom Lay letter sets, the words are already in position, but supposing you want to write exit. What I'd say to do is take a piece of tape, lay it nice and straight, and then there's little dots on the letter set underneath each letter. Line up each dot, and then peel up the tape. This way you get a nice straight edge here. And one of the things I try to do on any, let's use a traditional stunt ship, just for an example here, is I try not to have the same letter sets here, here, here. Let's say we use one style, then up around a canopy you might want to use script. Back here some little tiny little square ones, maybe around the tail. There's usually some letter sets down here. But a couple of different styles kind of makes it interesting. If you take, and a big mistake I've seen is, and I won't mention any names, is they buy one style of letter set and they just go da 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 da, and it all looks like it came off one letter set sheet, and it's probably 100 hours of extra work, and it looks like a letter set sheet because they're all the same. You know, I like to get a couple of varieties, some script, some block, some bold. If you have a couple of different colors, that seems to help. But don't make them all the same. The same, I don't know. Can't go for that. You see how we just lettered it off right off the tape? So now I always write out and check the spelling on what I'm doing since I'm so educated now. And then lay out the letter set sheets, the capitals and the smalls. If you have fresh ones, try to use the fresh ones up. Typically, the pilot's name would always be in script anyway, or fancy lettering, whatever. Now, of course, I try to check from the front that I have the letters parallel. They're both the same height on both sides. Kind of give that a little look, and then think about the next thing we're going to letter set up here. Now, I don't really know if I can show on the camera here what's happened is, let's see, maybe a little bit further away, is I put a coat of clear on this yesterday and it got all foggy from humidity. Well, when that happens, here's some of the things you can do to make it a little bit better anyway. I'm not getting this right. I can see through the lenses. This is foggy though, and here's the airplane. Let's see if you can see the comparison in the color here. Anyway, what this is all about is, when I finish the ink lines, I like to go get a coat of clear on them, just to seal them up so I can't smudge them with my finger. Now, if you go out, and yesterday it was, I guess the humidity was real high, this went on nice, but when I got up this morning, I took a look at it, and it's kind of wet and mushy. So what I'm going to do is take some 1200 paper and just lightly, ever so lightly scuff this up, try to get rid of that fogginess, and then turn the heat way up in the house. And this is the key thing. I'm going to turn the heat up to 90 in the house and get the air as dry as I can, bleed all the humidity out of the compressor, and then give this another shot and see if I can get rid of some of the fogginess in the paint. As soon as I finish up the lettering on a canopy here, I'm going to try to get some clear around the edges, around the 18, so I can see. But first, the idea is I want to make sure I can spray the clear and not have it get foggy on me. Now, if it gets foggy, you can add more and more thinners up to a point, and that when it gets too thin, I'd say that point is probably when it's 70% thinner. Then you have to start adding either retarder or high gloss thinner to get the blush to go away. We're still running into a blush problem today, so this may or may not be practical even to spray. If we can't spray, we'll do some more letter sets and maybe even lay out some of the ink lines here. Okay, what's happening with any blush you have is the lacquer is skinning over and trapping moisture inside. Sometimes, in very rare cases, if you can do a test, you can try this, is you can just put more thinner in a paint, go right back and spray right over it, and the blush will go away, but not always, and certainly not in this case. So what I'm doing is I'll give it a little scuffing with 1200. Now what that does is when the thinner gets in there, it hits the sanding scratches and it goes down and releases some of the blush. Sometimes that doesn't even work, and in those cases you got to go back and sand some of this stuff off and respray the color. I'm hoping I don't have to do that. As soon as you see the red coming through, you know you can't sand anymore. This is just the lightest, and just the reason I want to show this, the lightest of sandings. You're just trying to scratch up the surface, put a little bit of a scuff on it so that the moisture can come out as soon as the thinner hits this. Now what I'll do is the paint I used yesterday, I'll add maybe 10% more thinner to it. If that doesn't work, then I have to use a little bit of either high gloss thinner or retarder, which is basically the same thing. But keep in mind, what you're trying to do is let the paint dry longer. When it leaves that fogginess, I don't think this is even going to show on the camera. When you trap that fogginess, what's happening is you're trapping moisture inside, like on a window that's all fogged up. And so you need to break through and let that moisture out. Now let's hope that, we'll try this and see if it works. Now I've kind of lucked out on this. I put about, oh geez, maybe 4 ounces of thinner in the gallon of clear that I'm using, and the blush went right away. But what happens here is now, when you get the clear thinner, you have to lower the pressure. So I'm down to about 22 pounds now from 25. With the pressure low, and with a little more thinner in the paint, I have no blush at all here, and everything is like hopefully going to stay this way all day. It's coming out with a nice, relative nice, smooth finish, very little orange peel. So, with that in mind, I'll put a second coat on this about an hour later, and then go back to letrasetting the body. Now with this much done, I want to go out and try to get a coat of clear on this so I don't keep brushing up against it while I do the upper part of the wing. Today I want to take a couple minutes here. I sprayed some clear on good old number 18. These are pictures that came in from Joe Adamusco today, and of course he's the father, or illegitimate father, of Tsunami here. And he says this is a ship that he's building right now, Pattern Master Aerodynamics, French Cut, Tradition, wingtips, carbon fiber, spruce spar, rod constructed, Cobra style rudder, cardinal nose construction, V deflector, geodetic flat tail, now that looks cool, removable tail wheel, replaceable tail wheel, 700-inch cardinal, due to have a 51 in it. Now, I pass all these, by the way, here's the side view of it. I pass all these photos, like I do with all my photos now, on to Tom Morris in the hope that he'll use some of these in Stunt News. So, guys out there, if you have some photos you want to see on the video and in Stunt News without having to make 2 copies, send them in. Now this really has the look I like. This is the real Cobra, Bubra. Cobra. Steve Woolley would roll over in his autoclave here. Check this out. And I think you notice another thing. He has a movable rudder. Maybe this is even a Rabe rudder. I can't tell here. Joe, need more details. Rabe rudder. Don't build planes without a Rabe rudder. Really nice. Here's the last picture here. Check out how nice and neat the workshop is. Now notice, he stole an idea off of my shop of putting the lights on a 45-degree angle off of the corners of the ceiling. Notice that's a significant thing. And needless to say, anybody that's seen Joe's planes up close up front, top of the line, world-class stuff. Now what I've been doing, I've been getting ready to lay out the lettering on the top of the wing here, and I've been looking at some of the lettering designs. I'm trying to come up with an original idea. This, of course, is the original Tsunami. This is a book, and we'll show some pictures of this at the end of the video. I'm looking at some of the lettering styles, some of the things that are on the videos, that are on the books. And I've had these on the coffee table in the living room. I get rid of all my wife's Victorian Home magazine. Look at some of the ways the lettering is laid out around the cockpit, the canopy. This is some of the things you can get from these books. In particular, I was looking at this lettering. I kind of like this lettering here, the Dago red lettering. I'm going to try to do a composite of all of these. Down here you can see the lettering for Strega. I know Gerald Champ likes Strega. Here's one my wife said I should paint this girl on a wing, only make it her. I don't know, honey. I don't know if we're ready for that yet. Need pictures of the Red Baron in this book too here. I'm just looking at lettering here. All I'm trying to do is get lettering ideas. Again, this is the third paint scheme of the Red Baron with the Michelob lettering and all the little stuff around the canopy. A Reno Air Racer usually has a lot of little lettering around the canopy, the pilot's name up around the canopy. These are just things we're looking at right now, trying to get some ideas. Maybe somebody out there will do a P-51 with this checkerboard. Cool idea anyway. Hey, cool idea for the future. And again, just going back and forth and trying to get ideas here. We want to come up with some real cute looking lettering. The only way you're going to get ideas, assuming you don't have one, if you already have an idea, hey, great. You don't see many gold brown Mustangs. There's an unusual one here. Kind of like this profile view of Tsunami here. Looks like Paul Walker's Reno Air Racer here. Teeth and checkerboards. Well, whatever turns you on. Anyway, we have some ideas. We're going to get ready to go do the trim on Tsunami. There's a lot of ways you can do lettering here. These are just ordinary 1-inch letter sets you can buy and press on. Not too exciting. The VMAX Griffin and the Red Baron, that was all done with masking tape. Strictly a masking tape job. And you can see on the top here, well, if you want to see how this guy was done, we have the video on this lettering, the metal flake lettering outlined in silver from last year. No point going back and doing that too much. But what we want to really do now is we want to come up with what we hope is going to be a very original, and since the paint scheme is kind of not too busy on this, we can really busy up the lettering and make it real slick looking, we hope, and it'll really add a nice dimension to the airplane. Again, we don't have to make it prototypical. It doesn't have to be exactly like the plane is. This is our little fantasy plane, and we can do whatever the hell we please on it. So we're going to try to give it that Reno Air Race flavor. And we have the lettering up around the cockpit, which is typical of a Reno Air Racer. And what we're going to try to do is lay out some lettering on a wing with masking tape. That'll kind of be original, kind of neat. Set it off in a crowd, and you know, hope that it's going to be the look that we want. Always that mind's eye look. Looking at books until my eyes hurt. Step one for any lettering job. Get some old M600 and get that surface clean. Get your hands clean. And let's get ready to lay out. Let's get fresh rolls of tape. Not trying to use up last year's old tape or any kind of use it up while you can thing. Get everything cleaned up, and we'll start. Now we have to get the idea in our mind. We'll start laying it out, just roughly blocking it out. Now, an easy way just to get an idea of how you want your lettering to look is just get an idea now of how big of an area we want to cover. We want to make up kind of a rough outline of just how big we can have this lettering. And if you just make up a big blank sheet, then you could sketch out the lettering however you think you're going to want it. Again, that's where the books come in handy. Having the books available, or even in this case, you don't even have to buy the books, you just have the video. Okay, now I can see this is going to be a little larger than I really want it. I really don't want it to be that large. So again, I'll just go now. What I'll do is I'll go down to the desk and start sketching out the lettering and make like a paper doll pattern of what I want, and come back and mask it off with the thin masking tape. But just work off of this, knowing this is going to be the area that you're going to use. Now, if you looked at the other video, the Cardinal video, we're doing this pretty much the same, except it's laid out this way. Now, what I did, I laid the lettering out with a ruler into blocks. It'll be T-S-U-N-A-M-I. So I have blocks now. Now I wanted to make the letters a little bit thicker, so I cut a piece of cardboard, this is just an IBM card, to the thickness that I want. Now, what I'm going to do now is just trace this out, make the lines a little bit heavier so I can tell which is which, with this pen, and I can use this actually for a little ruler. You know, the idea here is you don't need a lot of sophisticated equipment. You don't need a lot of, you really don't even need a lot of talent. What you need is a mind's eye of what you want to do, and then you just need to go about laying it out. Now I'm going to lay the rest of this out. I just have the simplest of tools here, rulers, pens, until I make up what is going to be a pattern for the letters. What I'm looking for is to just have a pattern. And when I have the pattern, from that point on, I'll just lay the letters out on a wing in a position I want them, and then outline them with the thin 1/8 inch tape, one by one. But this allows me, now I can make pattern after pattern after pattern until I come up with a look that's pleasing to me, or a thickness. I can change the spacing, I can change the thickness. I start with that area that I want to cover with lettering, and now I'm just going to lay each one out, letter by letter by letter by letter here.
Mix one. We'll get a look at winners.
Now, next thing is we'll take this over, we'll make up a duplicate pattern of it so that we can do the AMA numbers. That's the other thing, to balance it off on the other wing. But get a brand new number 11 blade and cut this out so that we have little paper doll lettering to put right on the wing. Looks like we have a good pair of scissors here. This will be an easier way to do it because the lines are mostly straight here. And just cut them right up. Now in each letter we're going to have to poke a little hole, in fact a couple little holes, so that we can use masking tape to hold them in position. So you just randomly, as you cut them out, put a couple of holes in there. Now what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to include a full-size layout of this lettering on the plans when Gerald does the plans. I want him to include these so that anybody building Tsunami, if you choose you want to duplicate the lettering, you'll have this as a reference guide just to do the lettering. And you'll have to figure out your own AMA number from that. Now with all these little pieces just taped in, I can kind of move them around and get an idea as to just how I want to lay this out, how far from the trailing edge. Look at it from a lot. Best thing, of course, is lay it on a floor. You can see I have it on a floor right now. Lay it on a floor when you do this. Kind of look at it, see if it's balanced, if it meets your mind's eye, the dimensions that you had or whatever, the picture you had in your mind's eye. What I'm going to try to do now too is I just wanted to see how this is going to look on the top. I haven't even decided on what color this is going to be yet. I'm still looking at the Mustang books. But one of the things I'm going to do, I'll send these patterns when I'm finished out to Gerald. Of course, I said that before on the plans. And if anybody needs special custom numbers, I guess they can just figure out from these how to go about making that last number so that you can get that balanced look. Now what I'm going to do, since I'm going to put lettering on the top and the bottom, I want to put the lettering, of course, on the bottom first. This will give me a chance to practice, lay it out, make any changes, decide what color I'm going to use, finish it all up, make some mistakes, go on and on and on and on. But always the bottom first. So with that in mind, I'll pull all this off the top, lay the plane over, and get started on laying this out on the bottom. Now I'm starting to lay this out on the bottom, and step one is, before you go any further, get the T-square out and make sure you're not putting it off on an angle. And I have the tape outline right on 6, so that's good. And that's going to be my border, my box, so to speak. Extra copies. I think you can pretty much figure out what we're doing here. I'm just going to outline everything in 1/8 inch tape and just go down one letter at a time. Kind of a cut and dry thing. And then I'll go out, I get the AMA numbers on the other side. And of course, by doing it on the bottom, I get to practice, see what color I like, and if I don't like it, I can make the top just a little different or a little nicer or whatever. But kind of like the way this lettering worked out, kind of happy with it. Has that race car look. What you always want to do at the end is lay one piece of tape. You notice I didn't lay the tape out. The whole top stripe is one piece. And what this does, it gets all the letters in a perfect line. Now the other thing that we want to do, you notice we have a gap between each letter, is you want to make sure each gap between the letter is equal. And I've tried to lay it out so it's just less than a piece of 1/8 inch tape. Now if one piece of 1/8 inch tape doesn't cover this in one shot, then you know you have the spacing off just a little bit. You should be able to just go right down the list here and fill this in. And what we want to wind up with is this is a very easy way to do lettering. It takes a little time, but you can really do some pretty exotic lettering where when you lay out those big sheets, I don't know, anytime I lay out those big sheets of stuff, they always seem to be a problem. I get wrinkles in them. And maybe Busso could tell you how to do that a little bit better. But this way, the advantage of doing it this way, virtually anybody can create some really slick looking lettering. I'm sure Walt Prey would have some, some really things to add to this, but maybe we can get him to put something on a video one of these days. Anyway, but this is a time-proven way. I've done many ships. The lettering always comes out kind of unique. It doesn't have the look of decals or stencils. Every lettering job is different, custom. And it always seems to add a little class to the plane. Now we'll just finish this up off camera. Okay, now once you're sure you have the look that you want, of course, now I'm going to press down all the tape edges and get that thin coat of clear along the edges. Let that dry, and while that's drying, I can be balancing out, working on the other side. Figured a layout like this takes about an hour a panel, so you don't want to start this 11 o'clock at night, that's for sure. No, people you can do to help. Okay, we'll finish up in between all the blanks here and then get ready to put the tin foil around it. Lay it on the floor, get the tin foil out and the tape and get this ready. We may even get some of this sprayed today. This actually went pretty good. I always like to lay it out on the floor here and get an idea of exactly how it's going to look from a lot of different angles. One of the things I like is from this angle here, you're going to have a straight bar going right across the wing. That might look real good in maneuvers. May accent the square maneuvers. Well, we'll find out. Anyway, time to get out the tin foil, and you know the rest. Tin foil, edge everything out with clear, and get the airbrush out. In fact, we're going to try to do this with the spray gun, but we may have to use the airbrush. We'll give it a try. Okay, I give all the edges a final press down. I'll go put some paint in the gun and let's paint. Time to paint. Just set off the smoke detector here with the paint. Anyway, want to get the first step here, get a coat of silver on the lettering. All masked off with tin foil a la Walt Prey. And then we'll start trying to fancy this up little by little. Okay, we got our first coat of silver on here, and of course we'll let this dry as the next step. Now while this is tack drying, I put a piece of tape right out in the middle of the letters, right out in the middle, and I'll mask off the bottom piece, and I want to shoot a little blue on the top. I'm just trying to do a little fade down each letter here, starting dark at the top and working my way down. Now as the first part of the faded lettering, I'm just going to let that sit for a while, let it dry up, and then we'll do the bottom. We're going to do the bottom in a darker color. I'm going to mix some silver and black for the bottom, the charcoal color. Now to do the bottom, what I use is an ordinary IBM card, and just mask off the top half. Start right in the blue. And just fade your way down. Give you a little idea here. Now, as soon as you do a couple letters, turn the card over because the paint will be dripping off the edge here. It'll be a problem. You got to constantly turn the card over. Or just replace the card. Use a new one. Okay, that takes care of the two-tone part of the lettering. Now what I want to do, I want to put some white highlights in the corners here. I'm going to have to make up a little pattern for that. Pretty much the way we did the rudder. Same way we did the rudder. Just going to make up a couple little patterns. You see, I just cut a piece of cardboard to a corner so I can put little corner accents in here. Now you just see the corner, just one shot with the airbrush and bring it out. One shot with the airbrush, bring it out. Just do the corners a little bit. Gives it a little three-dimensional look. Now the trick with all these things is keep the edges clean. Once you spray it a few times, in this case I just threw it away, go make another one up. And if you just do the corner and let it walk its way out, it's a nice three-dimensionalizes the whole thing. And this really doesn't take a lot of time. That's the beautiful part of this. It only takes a few minutes to run this off. Now to get the accent on the top of the letters, you got to lay out a piece of 1/8" tape here, right along the joint line. Make sure it's not too sticky. Just lay a piece of tape out there like so. And you have your top accent. Now I'm doing some light charcoal accents in the corners, just to give it a little three-dimensional look. And something like this, you can be real creative about it, because it doesn't have to match anything. You can just kind of improvise it as you go. Okay, got all these little accents in here, and I guess we'll give this an hour or two to dry, and then we'll start pulling off the paper and see what it looks like. Now obviously we're going to outline it with black ink or a pen or something, so kind of happy with the way this came out. It looks, well, different. Looks like nothing else that I've seen or done. Now I got a real nice new store credit card my wife's allowing me to use to shave the paint. Again, the edge of a credit card is just, when they're new, is great. Shave everything off, and we're going to look at this for the boys. Kind of like it. Everything left is to get the ink lines around this and get some clear on it. Then we'll probably work on that tomorrow. This is kind of enough for one day here. Yesterday what I did, I got a coat of clear on all the letters and numbers and everything. The side now has 3 nice coats over the letters, over the wave here. You can see it's starting to build up nicely with clear. I got 1 coat of clear on the bottom numbers. And I'm going to lay out, I won't do this on video, it's just going to be redundant. I'm going to lay out the whole tape, all the tape on the top, spray it, get as much sprayed as I can and work it up to probably where I'm taking the tape off. And then the next step, hey, we got the same old numbers here. The idea of doing it this way, the big advantage is now I can look at the bottom and anything I want to change. I want to make a little lighter, a little darker, a little different, change the colors a little bit, whatever I want to do. I can do it on the top and hopefully make it even better than the one on the bottom. That's why I always suggest you do the bottom first. Now with the letters laid out, I made some real small changes that you probably won't even see. Some changes to spacing between the letters. I moved a little bit closer together from the bottom. I think that's going to look a little better. I changed the positioning of the N and the 7 a little bit. These are the things, this is the reason you do the bottom first, so you can take advantage of going through this whole cycle once. Now when I do the second cycle, I already have the paint mixed. I have all the ideas in my mind of how I want this to look. The top, in theory, should look even better than the bottom, hopefully. Now because I painted this yesterday, I have all the paint kind of mixed at the right consistency. all the fisheye and Flexall's in, and the second part of the job usually goes a lot quicker and smoother than the first part. The first part you're mixing and shaking and moving and changing and whatever. This tends to go a little quicker. You get your pressures all down right. And we have a rough idea what design we're looking for here, so usually the second part of it, if it took, say yesterday it took 6 hours to do the bottom, today I guess it's going to take maybe 3 to do the top, maybe 4. I don't know, it does go a lot faster though. Now one problem we ran into, it's pouring rain out there now, so we're going to have to mix the paint accordingly, a little bit extra thinner and allow a little bit extra drying time. I have the heat in the house turned up to 90. That's why you notice I'm working with a t-shirt on even though it's 10 degrees outside. Doors and windows are all open everywhere, so. Now because I have a lot of thinner in the paint, I'm going to let this dry for a while and then give it a second coat. Okay, again, with thin paint, you always have to be concerned with putting more than one coat. Yesterday, you know, about like a coat and a half. Today I'm going to need, it looks like 3 coats of silver to get this nice and silver. And the base, obviously we want the base to be real nice and bright. So we're just going to finish this up. If you thin the paint out and put more coats on, it'll work. Give it a half hour or so to dry between coats, 15 minutes maybe. See how she's drying up today. Well, it took 3 real coats of silver here. I don't know why. I got the paint very thin. Next thing, obviously, we're going to repeat the steps that we did on the bottom. We'll just show some pointed things. One of the things we're going to change is we're going to make the templates up ahead of time for doing all the detail work. That'll make it a little bit easier. Instead of sitting here with the spray gun going, trying to cut and make templates, I'll make the templates up ahead of time. Again, you fine-tune it on the top. That's the whole idea. You get all your things in a row, you paint your pressures and everything, and then you get the side that you're really going to see. You try to get this really perfect. Now I've had to thin the candy blue even more than yesterday. Again, I'm trying to darken in the top of the letters here for a nice faded effect. Kind of let it just fade into the horizon point. My name for doing this kind of lettering is called horizon point, where it changes from a sky color to a ground color. I don't know what Walt Prey would call this, or anybody who's a professional letterer, but horizon point. Now you can use the same, I've used IBM cards, you can just reverse this later. After the blue dries, reverse it so we can do the charcoal gray. If you decide you're going to do horizon point lettering like this, a good way to get some ideas is go get a funny car magazine, Hot Rod magazine, or a Reno Air Race magazine. Loads of good ideas, loads of them. Now when you do the bottom, the charcoal part of this, it's good to keep the stripe that goes across the middle as dark as possible, and even overlap it just a little bit. I could see from doing this yesterday, overlapping it was a critical part. Make a stripe right across, and now take each letter and just fog your way down. Fog your way down into the letter. And when we put the details in this, we'll put the details in with white. It gives it a diamond look, like a little faceted look. Kind of original, kind of different. I don't think you'll see this on any Kenworth truck or anything. Probably Walt Prey has done this 1,000 times and he's probably laughing at me here, but if this gives you a little idea of how to put some nice lettering on your plane, worth the price of the tape. And just get that edge going right across, start. And of course, now the detail work with the white starts. It's a good idea to just let this dry a little while. Make up your templates ahead of time and get the white in the gun. Make sure the white is nice and thin. Get nice edges on it. Shoot 2 or 3 corners and then wipe the template, or just go use another one. Now you just get the details in here, and you got to kind of freelance this. There's really no set way of doing this. And what it does, it kind of looks like a mirror when you do it right. Right across the middle here, it looks like you have a little mirror, diamond reflections, whatever you want to call it. Again, right across the bottom, the same thing. And what would be a good idea, if you haven't done this before, is just go practice on a piece of linoleum or sheetrock or something. Get it down pat before you go do the plane. This is almost ready for the clear, and I may even get to shoot the clear today and put him aside. And then he'll be ready. Now I like to get a coat of clear on here before I put the ink, because it's going to be so hard to get the ink on here with the silk span going up and down. So we'll get a coat of clear on here, and maybe tomorrow even get some ink on it. Now the first coat of clear is on here. This is just to seal it up. Get an idea of when we can start getting the ink around the lettering, fancy it up a little bit. I'll let this dry. You can see actually it's fogging up here, even though there's humidity in the air here. And the humidity is, I'm going to have to add a little bit more thinner to the paint. So I'm glad I didn't overspray this. Now if you see the fogginess coming up like we're doing here, I don't even know if you're going to see this on the video. You see that humidity, fog, whatever you want to call it, just get some more thinner in the paint right away. Well, this is the end of this tape, and we're going to pick this up with the ink lining work and putting the edges around all the lettering here on the next tape. So if you're picking up some good information here, I'm really glad about it. We'll end the tape with a couple of pictures, maybe some ideas from our Mustang books, and then we'll get right on to the next tape tomorrow. Now, these are just some of the other books that have come in from people with just inspiring pictures, ideas, and specifically lettering ideas. Maybe you can pick some up off of this. We'll put a few of the pictures on the end of this video, but if you have never seen any of these magazines, these are, I think, better than average as far as having ideas. Mustangs, Corsairs, more Corsairs, oh. Just one good thing after another here. More Mustangs, more Mustangs. Just the idea that you can pick up some ideas from these and maybe you can put them to use, even if you're not building a Mustang, just having some cool, I know Billy Werwood used that idea on one of his planes. We talked about that on the way out to Washington. Checkerboards, ideas, or at least you see things that you really, maybe you wouldn't even care about. Reno, anniversary of Reno, Strega, who knows, you know, if you don't check this stuff out, hey, you never really do know. But I've used it as a as a good guide on getting some ideas, and I hope by watching the videos you can pass these ideas on, or put them to good use yourself anyway. Pond racer here with Rick Brickert, who got killed in a pond racer, of course, a story. That is one thing in this magazine I will mention, and that is with the death of John Sandberg in Tsunami. It says in this magazine, and I don't know exactly where I read it, but Gary Levitz took his ashes out the day after the Reno race and scattered them across the mountains around Reno. So I guess that's a fitting tribute to John Sandberg if there ever was one.
What do you do first? See? 25. Last. Which one? First. When was he born? '99.
No longer experience. And even my amazed. burned.